Atheist Alliance International podcast with Andy Phillips.
I don't make this stuff up.
You know, if you put Jesus Christ first, that he'll look after all your bills.
It's not fake, it's faith.
Hi, you're listening to the Atheist Alliance International podcast with me, Andy Phillips. Now, this is the podcast that brings you interviews and news from a secular world. We're on all the major podcasting platforms, so follow us on your favourite platform. We're also on YouTube, so if you're watching on YouTube, then hi. In a few moments, we have an interview with Thomas Sheedy. Now, Thomas Sheedy is the president and founder of Atheists for Liberty, and I'm going to be talking to him about his organisation and his views on the state of atheism and the atheist movement around the world in a very, very divided and divisive period of time in our lives. Now, in the last podcast, I spoke to Bill Favell, the Vice President of Atheist Alliance International, about the work our organisation does to help atheists who are in serious danger around the world. Now, as you probably know, leaving a religion and becoming an atheist, or just simply losing your faith, can be massively problematic for people. If you're born within a highly religious community or a highly religious family, then simply stating openly that you're an atheist can lead to some quite serious abuse. People can be rejected by their families, which can, well, it can lead to things like loss of access to their spouse, for instance, or their children, which is horrific to think about. They can lose their job, loss of earnings and things like that. And younger people can be made homeless and may even lose their education and their right to education, or their access to education if their families withdraw financial support. And in some cases, it can get really, really serious. The consequences can be really, really quite terrible. People who lose their faith and openly state that they're an atheist can be subject to brutal beatings and even lead to atheists losing their lives. There's also something which blows my mind, which is there's a lot of draconian blasphemy laws in many countries of the world which are putting atheists and non-believers in prison for long sentences. You know, we're talking about a child of 13 being put in prison for 10 years. And in some cases, people are being sentenced to death for blasphemy in the 21st century. Unbelievable, really. Now, this is happening right now, every day and right across the world. And the only way we as an organisation can continue to help is if you can find it in your heart to donate to us and even become a member of Atheist Alliance International. So what I'm going to say is go over to our website, which is atheistalliance.org, and find out more about our work. And please support us and become part of the solution. Now we're going to get on to our main guest on the podcast today, and today it's Thomas Sheedy, founder of Atheists for Liberty. Hi, Tom, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Andy. How about yourself?
I'm really, really good. Really, really good. It's probably good for me because it's like mid-afternoon for me. It's morning for you, and I guess you're just waking up and just going, "What the hell's happening with the day?" Yeah,
exactly. I needed to get energized, make myself a little more presentable for today. I appreciate your willingness to understand that.
I'm honoured. Thanks for that. So I think that the best thing to do is to start off with just a bit of an explanation of the organisation, Atheist Liberty first, just in case people don't know who you are, what you stand for, and things like that. So can you give us a little bit of a rundown on the organisation to start with?
Sure. So Atheists for Liberty is a U.S.-based 501c3 nonprofit organization. We care about sustaining individual rights and protecting the separation between religion and government, free speech, free thinking, and freedom for all. The three F's that we give. It's a great organization. We founded it. We debuted it back in February of this year at the Conservative Political Action Conference, and we are growing day by day. So I'm glad to be in the position that I am here. I'm in now, and I'm glad to be on the show.
Excellent. What's the history of this thing? Because to start with, I always like to try and find out why people are atheists in the first place. What made you an atheist? What turned you into a dreaded atheist?
So for me personally, I was raised Roman Catholic for 15 years. Just sort of lapsed. My mother is a very religious person. My father is a little more of a lapsed Catholic. So I got a childhood that was kind of in between. those two phases of religiosity. And I always kind of never took church seriously. I always saw going to church as a boring, tedious task. I never really cared about it. And then when I started to look into politics more, I saw theology and a lot of the practices of the church as sort of a roadblock to human achievements that could better the West and better society. Especially when the gay marriage debate was going on a lot in the United States. I saw really the only deterrent against two civilized homosexuals getting married being religion. So I always had a bit of a problem with the church, even when I was religious. And then back in 2013, I remember seeing a Bill Maher clip from one of his old 2000s era skits, where he talked about how when he was a child, mercury used to be in every single medicine. And later on, we realized that mercury is a painful or unhealthy substance, and he got it drilled out of him. And then I remember he followed immediately after by saying, and you can do the same thing with Catholicism. And at that moment, I remember that was the exact second that I became an atheist. It was either sometime in May or June. I was studying, and I was just looking at Bill Maher on YouTube, and that was the moment for me. Skepticism of the church, and then that final personal moment for me. Afterwards, I started to learn more about the organized atheist movement, what the new atheism was, all the US-based national organizations that were around fighting for a separation between church and state, atheist normalcy, hearing about science and reason and rationality more than superstitious thinking. And I got my start in the movement shortly after.
So to actually come out as an atheist, it is a sort of a statement of intent in some ways, isn't it? I mean, because I remember when I sort of, I've been sort of doing discussions with theists for a long time in pubs and bars and things like that, and that was sort of it was sort of enjoyment to me, because I really can't understand why people would follow superstition blindly the way they do. Right. But so to me, it was like an epistemology thing. You know, I used to enjoy the conversation and things like that, but I never really sort of came out specifically as an atheist until I started to do a lot more of that and stand tall as an atheist. So I wasn't agnostic or anything. Right. Do you feel the same? I mean, is it important to actually stand up and say, I am an atheist person, as opposed to someone who doesn't care or agnostic?
I would absolutely say so. If you look at the statistics, most people don't really understand what agnostic means. Most people don't really understand the whole basis of being non-religious. Saying the A word, the word atheist, really gets the message across, even if it has a negative connotation to it. The truth is that atheism is still growing. We're becoming a more secular society throughout the US, throughout Canada, throughout Britain, throughout France, throughout Belgium, throughout much of the West, and even in many parts of the world. This is the new direction that humanity is going through. We could argue over whether or not humanity might be ready for atheism, but it's here. And we might as well get on with it and talk about, now in the age of science and reason, whether we should still move forward with superstitious thinking or not. So that's the conclusion I've come to. Yes, we should call ourselves atheists. We're in this new secular age. Might as well get on with it. So,
you know, you've called your organization Atheists for Liberty. Why did you call it Atheists for Liberty? And the only reason I ask is because when I first heard about it, you have knee-jerk reactions to the way words are used. You know, I mean, a lot of words are hijacked nowadays. I mean, they don't mean what they used to do when I was a kid. But when you called yourself, or you called your organization Atheists for Liberty, as I say, when I first heard that, I felt like it was like a more right-leaning organization, just because of the word liberty, because it's sort of been hijacked. You know, it doesn't really mean the same thing, state of being free within society and that sort of thing. With the sort of the sort of, I know, the classical liberal version of the word liberty isn't the same nowadays. It's got connotations to it.
It definitely has connotations to it. Definitely, a lot of people do come to a stereotypical conclusion when they hear that. I see Atheists for Liberty as the continuation of what the new atheists started back in the 2000s and into the early to mid 2010s. caring about individual liberty, the principles of the Enlightenment, principles that, in my opinion, the organized atheist movement, or what remains of it, at least in the United States, not talking about Atheist Alliance International, have strayed away from. And instead, many people in what remains of the movement, the majority of people, I think, are not, the majority of sane atheists, I think, are no longer part of the movement anymore, because it's gotten taken over by this new religion of wokeism, this sort of what you might consider far left or social justice activist or social justice warrior ideology that has pitted people against one another, that has defined people by their inalienable characteristics that they cannot change. We're sort of reverting back to a time of superstition and unreason, in a movement where we claim to push for reason, we claim to push for rationality. And in that sense of that woke takeover, there are plenty of atheists, normal, sane, kind atheists who fit different political and ideological characteristics that the new atheist movement, especially in its later years when this sort of woke infiltration happens, never targeted. So we're reaching out to good-minded liberals, the liberals that used to encompass the majority of the atheist movement, classical or traditional liberals, libertarians as well, and conservatives. So another good feature of having that For Liberty name, at least with the stereotype that comes along with it, is we also get to reach out to a whole segment of politics in the West that the atheist movement just never wanted to tackle. I think out of political bias, but mostly due to this wokeism.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, one of the things that interests me about, when I've heard about what you guys do, the sort of thing that interests me was that, yes, we talk about the woke side, and I want to sort of explore a little bit of that during this podcast, because I've got to tell you, from my little atheist bubble in the UK, we don't see it so much over here.
Good.
But it's very relevant. It's very sort of prevalent, rather, when you look at the sort of Twitter wars that go on, the sort of the social media stuff that sort of floods through from a meme, a opinion from someone. If it's not liked, it's pretty much jumped on, and I can understand why some people would take a section, may have a problem with something that someone says, but it seems like the sort of standard discourse that we normally have, the polite discourse that we can have as human beings, seems to go out the window pretty quickly, and it becomes a bit of a flood. And from my point of view, I see a lot of that stuff as just people being bullies for some reason. I mean, how do you feel about that sort of side of it? What's going on with that side?
It's absolutely ridiculous. We're seeing the modern elements of what makes up a civilized society go down the drain because we don't want to look bigoted, because we are so now trained in this fight for equality where we're actually throwing equality out the door in the name of supremacy of various different groups, all in the name to not look, all in the name, all under the brand of not wanting to look racist, all under the brand of not wanting to look sexist, homophobic, Islamophobic, whatever term you want to make up. And the new atheist movement was one of the first movements in modern day society to really face this woke infiltration. This really started for us back in 2011. Talk about reasonable discourse. I'll tell you a story. In 2011, there was an event, I don't know if you know of this, Andy, called Elevator Gate. Elevator Gate happened at an Atheist Ireland conference back in 2011. There was a conference that was going on. There was a speaker there named Rebecca Watson, who runs a blog called Skeptic. She's a feminist, skeptic, secular person. And she was, I believe, a speaker, either an attendee or a speaker. She was at the hotel bar of the conference, hanging out with people till 4 a.m. A lot of polite chats, a lot of, I would assume, conversation about science and other various topics. She later on decides to go up to her hotel room to retire for the night. She goes into an elevator. A gentleman follows her into the elevator, And while in the elevator, he politely says that he had a great conversation, a great time with her, and he was wondering if they could go up to his room for coffee. She politely declines. He politely says, okay. He gets out at his stop on the elevator. She then retires to her room. He retires to his room, right? That's a clean story of wanting something and someone politely declining a request, right? That's it, right? That's the end of it. No, because the man that politely asked Rebecca Watson for a cup of coffee, he was displaying his rampant privilege and his rampant sexism. And apparently this is an example of the gross sexism that is throughout the atheist movement. Because he is a male that has privilege, he was somehow harassing her when he was politely and consensually asking for a cup of coffee. Now, I'll make myself very clear. I am against sexual assault and sexual harassment in any shape or form, no matter where it is. But there was a lie that started in atheist circles that apparently atheist circles were unwelcoming towards certain groups of people, like women, like minorities. That simply wasn't true. But what we did is we ended up being racist ourselves and judged our conferences based on the color of their skin and what genitalia they have rather than the content of their character, rather than what people are actually saying. And we ended up fighting ourselves because we got infiltrated. Our movement got poisoned by this ideology, all in the name of combating sexism. And look at where the atheist movement now, at least I can speak from a US perspective, it's not really that exciting anymore. We shot ourselves in the foot, not to cause any bad drama, but most of our organizations, a good chunk of our organizations, are not doing work that is seen as that controversial anymore because we want to look more progressive and more humanistic. And that's not getting us anywhere. The new counterculture has moved on to fighting political correctness, either within libertarianism or the intellectual dark web or conservatism. That ship has left the door because we instead cared more about looking progressive than saving a healthy and thriving movement, which ended up throwing our fight for equality out the door, if you think about it. And now our movement is kind of in the dust.
I mean, the problem is, though, I mean, we've said this so many times in so many different discussions that the problem with an atheist movement, so to speak, is that the only thing that holds us together is our sort of disbelief or unconvinced position of the existence of a God, you know? And the problem is with human beings is probably, which is what actually happens with all of this stuff, is that we are political animals, and we're not, you know, you put 10 people in a room, they're never going to agree on everything. Exactly. And I can guarantee that, you know, there's going to be, you know, between me and you, our politics may be quite different. So, you know, and we're atheist, you know. So what do you think there is there hope for a consolidated atheist movement? I mean, this is one of the reasons why I've heard that you started Atheists for Liberty, was to try and get back to that point where we had a consolidated movement. Now, but is that a realistic goal? I mean, do you think
it's a realistic goal? I think it is a realistic goal if we outline the parameters first. I think we didn't do that. And as a result of us wanting to come off progressive, we ended up shooting ourselves in the foot, which killed the movement. We should have an agreed set of principles that we agree on, very basic principles. We should agree to disagree on a lot of other topics. And I've come to the conclusion, too, that I don't think we're ever going to get back to that point where all of the atheists and all of the organizations are ever going to have that kumbaya moment ever again. What instead it's going to be is AFL is going to attempt to get back into that movement, attempt to get into what has been established already. But to be honest, who knows if we're going to be accepted or not. So what we'll have to do after that is form a new movement of our own. Atheist Alliance International is in a very similar place where it has been shunned by these woke forces that have taken over much of the organized movement. So AAI has kind of had to move forward on its own. It could be a very similar situation for Atheists for Liberty. And what will happen after that is that AAI, AFL, maybe like Atheist Republic, a few of the other international organizations that care more about, saving people's lives and about first world safe spaces. A lot of us, I think, will get together and really continue sort of the enlightened mantra of what the new atheists began, while the other organizations can gloat about how they didn't accept bigots into their movement, despite the fact that, Andy, I don't think you're a bigot. I don't think I'm a bigot. I think Michael Sherlock is not a bigot. He's an Aussie with an interesting vocabulary, who I think is running a fantastic organization. And you've seen how vicious these forces are. I don't know if they are going to accept us, but we're not going to beg for their acceptance. We're not going to plead for it. If they don't want us, then we're going to move forward, because we're adults and we have a mission to get done, and we have lives to save, and we have a nation to better. So that's my conclusion on that. There is hope for a sect of the organized atheist movement to continue as counterculture, to continue as a force to save the goodness of our civilization that we have. But I don't think you're going to get like a Steve Shives and a Rebecca Watson to work together with a Michael Sherlock and myself. And I've said this on many other podcasts. If any of these regressive or social justice-based atheist organizations or any of these activists, if they ever send me an email and say, Thomas, we disagree on like 90% of the issues, but we happen to agree here, and we have a project we'd love Atheists for Liberty to work with us on, would you join us? I would say yes in a heartbeat. Am I ever going to get that email? Is Steve Shives or Rebecca Watson or any of the people probably from like Secular Women or any of these social justice, regressive left-based platforms, are they ever going to reach out to me and extend an olive branch? I say no. I don't think they're going to do that. I'll wait for the email. I'll be kind and I'll be a professional. It's kind of what the movement used to be, a movement of professionals. But I'm going to still move forward with my organization, move forward with rational, civilized people who want to save what's good about our society.
Yeah, again, it goes down to a lot of words. I mean, when you look at something like the word social justice, I think everybody in the world wants social justice.
It's a very nice sounding term, right? We want people to be treated fairly, regardless of their race, regardless of their sex, regardless of their gender, sexual orientation, whatever, religious identity, etc. That's something I want too. That's something that's why I'm a huge fan of my country, because we, at least now, are trying to uphold that. Sure, my country, and I bet your country as well, is not always perfect when it comes to making that possible, but at least that's our goal now. And we're trying to do what we can to make sure that there is an equality of opportunity for all. The problem is when you start going back to judging people based on the color of their skin. If your way to getting to equality is judging people based on the color of their skin and elevating certain groups again ahead of others, that's not how we're going to get there. That's how you care more about equality of outcome, and how you care about making up for the past or retributions or reparations, which I think would only increase the divide. That's not, I guess, a social justice that I would want, and I would assume you wouldn't want any day. I want people to be treated as individuals with ambition. Not as white people or as black people or as women or men. Obviously, there are biological realities, especially concerning, say, sex and gender, certainly. But at the same time, I want to treat people as an individual. I want to move forward knowing that every person has the ability to say things that are unique, that could shape society in unique ways. And going back to this barbaric dark age time of caring about, we're going to elevate whites over blacks, or blacks over whites, or Asians over Latinos. That's not going to do our society any good. It's going to go back to that old tale of judging people based on groups more than anything else. And that's going to kill liberalism, classical liberalism in the best sense of the word.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think that the only issue I have is that there has been inequality of opportunity for decades, centuries in some respects. And I think with activism, and you understand activism, you got to kick some doors down. You got to say the controversial things. You got to push the agenda as much as you possibly can, and you've got to fight for what you believe is right. Whether you think it's right is a different outcome from if someone's doing something which they believe is right, and they've got to push that agenda, whether it's race, sex, or whatever, gender. The whole thing has to be pushed and it has to be kicked down. And I think that it has to have its day. We have to have things like this going on. But if there is a future for us as a society anyway, I mean, just as a society, things do have to change. I think a lot of compromise has to be made along the way. But olive branches have got to be put out there as well, and I think if you can put out an olive branch to people that disagree with you politically, that's all you can ever do, and it's one of the things that, I mean, you talk about AAI, we've been kicked every so often. Our focus now is not really to worry about it too much, like put it to one side a little bit.
That's what I've been trying to tell. That's what I've been trying to tell AAI. Don't even worry.
It's difficult though. It is difficult to do that, because you have to, we have to consider things, and we have to take things on board and try and understand the things that are going on and what's the best route forward and things like that. And sometimes we get it wrong. I mean, we're human. we screw up sometimes, and that's fair enough. But if you put your hands up and say, "Look, I fucked it up," let's move on and let's go and do something else. But the bottom line is, I think that a lot of this stuff has got to be taken on board. I'm not particularly a woke person at all. I hate a lot of that stuff. A lot of it's bullying, and I don't really like it.
Well, you're in AAI. And apparently AI is the hub of bigotry in the atheist movement.
But there's a lot of things within some of the things, I see this as like, got one extreme over one side, one extreme over the other, and we're sort of caught in the crossfire. People of reason are caught in the crossfire, and you've got to justify things every so often. You've got to sort of justify your existence, your position, what you do, what you say, how you are, and all those sort of things. So I think, the sort of organizations, and I think it's the way that we actually, as we move forward, not just, your organization, our organization, even, organizations that are seen as woke, how they move forward and how they start putting olive branches out to the rest of the world, how we start putting olive branches out to the rest of the world, and actually look at this, the equality of opportunity as something that's really, really fucking serious. This has got to start happening in this world. And so I think if we can all do this, everybody's going to be a lot happier. This is the whole point of this condition of well-being that we go for. And then again, it's a secular thing. It's a humanism thing, and consequently it becomes an atheist thing. And so that's really sort of what I wanted to try and sort of work out what you think the future of this is going to be. Where are we going to go with this? Because when I did the maths many years ago, I worked out that if we all got together, or everybody who was either atheist, non-religious, the nuns as they call them, actually got together as a force to really start pushing for a secular world, we'd have a hell of a lobby group. I mean, a massive, massive lobby group. And you know what lobby groups can do? They can change politics. They can change things.
They are, in many ways, they already have. Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of lobby groups that are in there and kicking and screaming and making it happen. So do you see the sort of the future of this as actually working out in some way that is,
I see in many ways I do. In some ways we should be concerned. In the ways that I do, again, looking at the statistics, the modern world is becoming more secular day by day. The statistics just show it. In the United States, between 24 to 26 of the population is non-religious. That number is going to continue going up as Christianity, for example, religious affiliation in Christianity goes down. So that's a big plus. I think we're going to have to come to more scientific or reasonable conclusions to certain things about our existence and how we see civilization in comparison to the old supernatural claims we used to see in the past. The only problem that I have is that we have to kind of look both ways here. There is a superstition. There are a lot of superstitious elements of organized religion, and I'm glad that we are moving past that. But simultaneously, due to this growth of this new woke religion, we have to also fight the superstitions and dogmas in that as well. Because let's pretend that we don't, and yes, our civilization becomes very secular, we adopt a new religion in the process, where there's the original sin of being of a certain, say, skin tone or gender. And we start going back to sort of a religious way of thinking, just in a different way. And what that religious thinking would do is it would actually end up destroying the very building blocks that enable secular societies to exist in the first place. So I think it's fantastic and great, and we need to continue doing this, that we are seeing the bad elements of organized religion die off, which is fantastic. We need to keep going in that direction. Let's build up the lobbying groups. Let's get political acceptance on the political left, political right. Let's make secularism the norm, secularism and atheism more the norm. But simultaneously, let's keep the safeguards in that allow secularism and free debate and freedom of speech to exist in the first place. Otherwise, we're just going to end up adopting a new brand of religion in the process.
Yeah, I think this just sort of comes down to this concept of the separation of church and state as a serious concept. Because let's face it, religion uses politics, and politics uses religion.
Yes,
they seem to go hand in hand. I mean, if you look at some of the things, when I'm watching TV and we see what's happening with sort of America at the moment, it sort of blows your mind a little bit. It sort of blows your mind that you got Donald Trump as president, which whether you love him or hate him, it's just a little weird to have Donald Trump as a president of the free world. You know what I mean? It's like, it just seems a little strange.
It's definitely different.
It is very, very, very different. As I say, whether you love him or hate him, because I'm not really that political where it comes to these things. I mean, it's just I sometimes I look on it and I look on it with wonder more than anything else. But with something like Atheists for Liberty, do you look at the sort of the hard right side? The sort of the Christian nationalism concept. And look at how that can be sort of pulled away, because the last thing we need is like Christian nationalism to go run rampant through the United States. Surely
that is definitely a problem as well, and this is why I'm also not a big fan of the woke left. In many ways, the woke left is responsible for bringing this sort of new Christian right into existence. So just to give some context, right now in power of the right-wing Christians in power, right? You have the remaining elements of the 1980s, 1990s-esque religious right, also known as the Moral Majority Coalition, that started under the Reagan and George Bush senior administrations. They wanted to care more about religious morality and injecting their beliefs into the political process and into our secular government. And that's where I think the new atheist movement got its great start in fighting back against that. In many ways, we have succeeded, and we still have some ways to go. But the good news is that moral majority coalition is dying, both from an ideas perspective and physically. Some of the people are literally very old.
Yeah, very old. Yeah.
They are dying off. But the problem of the woke left, and the woke left doesn't like free speech debate, constitutionalism. They don't like parliamentary systems even. They don't like anything that requires discourse. They want immediate action. They want authoritarianism, essentially. They want to go back to the feudal days of old, where we sort of had an absolute system almost.
It's like a Marxist.
No.
You see it as a sort of a Marxist sort of version of I mean, is that what you think? Do you think it's Marxist, the
Yeah,
way
well,
they?
yeah, I would also say that. So Marxism also plays a big element in this. So a lot of them would operate also in the commune sort of system. But either way, these people don't like the sort of liberal or classical Republican elements that made up the United States, Britain, Canada. They don't like that. They think of it as a way to uphold the systemic problems that they've seen, and they want to tear that all down. Simultaneously, on the far right, you're seeing something quite similar emerge. There is a force of young people, very similar to my age. They're right now on the very edges of the far right, but they're succeeding, and they're coming in. They're trying to infiltrate the right from the far right, trying to say that the Constitution of the United States of America is a waste of time, and that we need to go back to judging people by the divine right of kings. And that is how people are meant to be naturally ruled. An infiltration of the conservative movement from the far right. And the conservative movement in the United States is doing what it can to resist these people. But when you have a far left that is calling for authoritarianism and the end to these really secular systems that have kept the West in place and the Enlightenment values that we hold in place, and a far right that is also against these values, we are being pitted from both sides. The religion of wokeness on one end and this divine right of kings, very far right Christian religion on the other. And I'm not even talking about most Christian conservatives. I'm not talking about most people on the political right. This is something that is very, very, very new. Or maybe we can get into the specifics of that movement more in a later appearance. But the atheist movement, or what remains of the atheist movement, especially when it comes to talking about Christian nationalism, they have it all wrong. Trump supporters are not this is me speaking, by the way, as just Thomas Sheedy for a moment. Trump supporters are not your enemy. Most conservatives are not your enemy. There is this new movement started by some very young people that is emerging, that is actual Christian nationalism. Actual Christian nationalism, not just a political talking point. And I've been paying attention to this movement, this new religious movement, for over a year. It's dangerous, and it's gaining more ground. And the more we spend time going after just conservatives because we don't like some of their political policies, it's going to divide the secular world even further. And this is why it's so important, where if the woke left and these woke atheist organizations or activists don't accept us, AAI, AFL, sort of enlightened new atheist organizations and activists that want to continue what the new atheists started, it's important that we band together now and move forward, because we don't have much time. You're seeing the woke left corrode certain parts of our civilization, and if that divine right of kings right gets into any sort of power, we're in for a whole lot of trouble.
So it's really trying to get that, I guess, the center ground in sort of, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I would argue
it's going to be that center ground that we've got to sort of really sort of.
Much of the for most of Western history, much of the political left and political right actually had a lot of agreements. We ended up having simple policy disagreements as to how we would get to certain conclusions. Liberals and conservatives for a long time claimed to love, say, in the United States, the Constitution of the United States, the freedoms that it gives, the liberties that it gives, how we have stood the test of time while numerous other civilizations have fallen due to their authoritarian and feudal tendencies. We're at the verge of being infiltrated as a nation by authoritarianism and those feudal tendencies. And the more that, good atheists spend time attacking conservatives because they don't like that conservatives stand for this policy they don't like or that policy they don't like, they are distracting themselves from the real civilizational consequences that these two extremes are posing right now. And it's really, really, really dangerous. So I'm asking good, moral, enlightened atheists to understand that we need to get out of our political closets right now and stand for the very building blocks that enable us to have these political discussions in the first place. And that's why I found it to be so important, especially in the United States, for Atheist Liberty to exist. We have very simple principles. We care about individual freedom. Okay, we care about enlightenment. We care about the Enlightenment. care about a free exchange of ideas. We care about the Constitution. We care about religious freedom and secular government, the building blocks that have made the United States what it is today. And I don't care if you are a liberal like James Lindsay or Armin Ababi. I don't care if you are in the conservative movement. I don't care if you're a libertarian. You stand for these principles. You stand for these building blocks. I don't go have your economics discussion or your policy discussion at the bar. Let's get to work right now because we don't have much time.
I think that's a perfect place to leave it, Thomas. That's absolutely fantastic. Thanks very much for joining us today. It's been incredibly interesting. You are a very, very interesting guy, and I'd love to talk to you further. So
I really appreciate
I'm going to get a hold of you again.
I really appreciate it so much. So first of all, I want to say before we end, I'm a big supporter of Atheist Alliance International. It's a great organization led by a great board. I'm a huge fan of people like John Richards on the board. Andy, I love what you're doing with this podcast. I wish you all the best. Michael Sherlock, who's the executive director of Atheist Alliance International, he's a great guy. Like myself, like John, Michael's been a big target of these woke activists too. Give Michael your support. I suggest joining Atheist Alliance International. I believe it's $15 a year for the minimal membership. I signed up very recently. I also suggest for all those listening that you check out Atheists for Liberty. We're a national US-based organization. We're in AAI, but we are your atheist activists on the ground in the United States, continuing what the new atheists are doing. We're not doing Atheism Plus. We're not doing this woke nonsense that took the atheist movement back in the United States of America. We're continuing what the new atheists started, and we understand the current political landscape and how we need to operate. So go check us out at atheistsforliberty.org. If you sign up as a member, it's $10 a year for Atheists for Liberty. So go get your AAI membership, go get your AFL membership, get that, solidify that together. AFL is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. You can find Atheists for Liberty on most social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Parler, Slug Agnostic, you name it. Search up Atheists Liberty and you will find us. If you're interested in me, my handle on Twitter is @SheedyTom, SheedyThom, and the same applies on most other social media platforms. Andy, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the time and your kindness and generosity to have me on.
Absolute pleasure, mate. Thanks very much. That was Thomas Sheedy from Atheists for Liberty. Now a quick message from our Executive Director of Atheist Alliance International. This is Michael Sherlock.
Two of Atheist Alliance International's core values are excellence and leadership. This is why even after we were awarded a platinum rating for transparency by the global charity service GuideStar, we took it upon ourselves to take our transparency as a global charity further than any other charity working in the same space. We've created a world-class transparency page where donors and members can see exactly how much money we raise, for what reason we raise that money, and how exactly that money is utilised. The world-class transparency page is updated monthly to ensure maximum transparency, setting a new bar for global charities. Atheist Alliance International is not merely transparent with the way in which we raise and utilise funds. We're also transparent with respect to the way in which we operate. We are one of the only global organisations that has its bylaws published publicly for all to see. So when it comes to our values of excellence, leadership and integrity, just visit our website to see how we openly demonstrate and live those values. I'm Michael Sherlock, Executive Director of Atheist Alliance International. Thanks for watching and listening.
Okay, that's it for today. If you want to follow the podcast, then make sure you jump over to the Atheist Alliance International YouTube channel and subscribe and hit the notification bell. We're also on all the major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. If you want to support Atheist Alliance International, then go over to the website at atheistalliance.org and consider donating and becoming a member. We can only carry out the important work we do, assisting atheists in desperate situations, with help from you. So remember, We're born of risen apes, not fallen angels, and we'll see you next time.